And so we're having Kristen Luck return to the stage with her perspective on insights into the future of marketing research, and let's see how this all plays together. Welcome back, Kristen. I don't have a clicker.
Clicker, clicker.
We have a clicker here.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. So I'm actually going to do a short presentation on behalf of SMR. I sit on the Global Council, and unfortunately, Laurent Flores, our esteemed president, council president, was intending to be here today, but unfortunately is home in Paris with the flu. So don't feel too sorry for him. There are worse places in the world to be stuck with the flu than Paris. But today I want to sort of talk about thematically what's going on at SMR. I know earlier in the day there was a presentation from Jane Marsh at MRS, who certainly has perspectives on what's sort of driving their industry organization forward. And I wanted to share with you some of the strategies that we're working on at SMR from a council point of view, and how we're really working to expand our global presence and the tie-in with some of the themes that you've seen at IIeX this week. So there's a few key themes, and some that just came out within the last two presentations that I feel sort of really illuminate not only a lot of what we're talking about here at the conference, but also what we've been working very hard on as a council with the SMR team. The first is this kind of idea of broadening of the insights role. So how do we become perceived as more than market researchers, but how are we really adding value to what our clients are trying to deliver ultimately? The second is data transformation and agility. And if you've missed any of the presentations on agile research, I would really, really recommend reading up on it. Actually, I don't even know how you could have missed any of these presentations, because there were about 20 of them, I feel like, at this conference. But data transformation and agility is really important, and it's something that at SMR we're really taking a look at, and at least in terms of our code review. Customer centricity. Denise Drummond, who is here, has written a fantastic book on customer centricity and presented on it earlier today. If you missed her workshop, you missed out. But I also know it's something that Fleur just mentioned in her presentation, and it seems to be in a lot of discussions that are happening at the conference, this idea of really putting the customer in the center of what we're doing. And then lastly is respondent experience, which seems to be tied into everything we're talking about, all these new tools, technologies, but more so also from how we're really designing studies and how we're interacting with respondents. And that, again, is something that's near and dear to our hearts at SMR. So one of the reasons that we're kind of focused on this, what we call the 2016-2017 growth strategy that I'll share with you in a minute, is because the market is really, really expanding in terms of the marketing intelligence. So the traditional kind of market research ecosphere is about $43 billion. But when we really talk about extending our reach and moving away from just market research to more of a marketing intelligence space, we're looking at about $65 billion. That's a significant growth in our business. And so aligning with certain growth strategies is very, very important to us. And there's a few drivers of change that we're really seeing. The first, is that changing customer data landscape, which has been mentioned a lot at this conference. The second is new functions and professions are coming into the industry. This has been a subject of much debate. I was at a conference earlier this year, and there was a debate about expanding codes to allow in a lot of companies that are primarily using secondary data. So you look at the Googles, Facebook, are those people that would be defined as insights professionals, or are they something different? So it's broadening that definition. The changing methodological paradigm, the shifting competitive landscape, the changing association and membership paradigm, which is under a great amount of change in the US in particular, where we have two of the major industry organizations actually emerging. Obviously, the changing employment landscape. We've talked a lot at this conference about, how do we engage millennials, and then Dave McCann has given a great presentation about how do we engage the older generation as well. So how do we provide diversity, and what does employment as a market research insights professional look like, in the next 10 years? Obviously, there's a lot of macroeconomic pressures that we're under. We have an increasingly strict regulatory environment, And there's a lot of commoditization of market research. You know, there's so much focus on tools and techniques, you know, and less so on the actual value add, which is this really strategic thinking that I think as an industry we really need to keep our eye on. And then that kind of plays in with the last point, which is this idea of the technological wild card. Like, we just don't know what's coming next, what's going to be the new advancement, what's going to, you know, really, really turn us on our ear. So SMR, as an industry organization, is really looking at a growth strategy that will secure the future of the industry and really combine this idea of the science of data and the art of insight, because it really is both a science and an art. I don't think you can really have one without the other. So there's a new vision that we've been working on, and which will extend through our work through the end of the Council's work this year. And that's really all about extending Insight's influence. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Insights 2020 report that's coming out in the coming months. The second is expanding our definitions and our codes. So broadening those definitions, looking at the new ways that we're doing research, and making sure that the codes are really, truly inclusive globally. And that brings me to the next point, truly global. And this was something that I brought up on our diversity panel discussion yesterday, which is, you know, are we a truly global organization if we're only providing content in English? If all of our major conferences are in English, and the only way that people can submit for conferences is in English, are we leaving out, you know, a whole group of people that have much to contribute, but may not feel comfortable doing so in English? And then lastly, you know, really focusing on bringing up the next generation of researchers. You know, how do we really engage millennials? How do we make market research an attractive profession, which many times is not an easy sell? So I want to touch briefly on the Insights 2020 study. If you're familiar with the Marketing 2020 study that came out a couple years ago, it was all about providing guidance for CMOs around, you know, what are key marketing drivers of growth. So what do the best marketers do? And basically SMR has partnered with LinkedIn, with the ARF, Kantar, Korn Ferry, and Millward Brown Vermeer to run a similar study for insights and analytics professionals. So what are the key drivers of growth in the analytics and insights profession? And this was a very broad study. They interviewed roughly 325 marketers, so people that have an insights and analytics function in brands, roughly 10,000 market research professionals across 60 countries. So a very, very big study. And some of the key drivers of growth that we found were, you know, one, purpose-led organizations, two, data-driven customization, touchpoint consistency, research that's really embraced by all. And the next slide, you'll kind of see how the insights and analytics function is sort of left out of some key discussions in the C-suite. Leadership priority, collaboration, experimentation, these are all things that drive success. You know, having a leading role in insights and analytics, unlocking the power of data and critical capabilities. The report is quite extensive. If you want to get a copy of it, I believe there's a page up on LinkedIn if you just search on Insights 2020, where you can actually download the full report. But I thought one of the things that was really illuminating about the report was actually that in almost 50% of relevant business cycle meetings, insights and analytics is not present or only invited on an ad hoc basis. And that number actually increases to 60% in board meetings. So although we're trying to evolve and we're trying to be more relevant, it almost seems like our relevance is oftentimes decreasing. And it's really something that as an industry we really need to be focused and vigilant about. And that kind of bleeds into this next idea, which is our code review objectives. So SMR has spent the last 6 months with a very large team of folks reviewing the SMR codes. Now, I don't know who here has actually read the entire SMR code. Any hands? Maybe some night when you were trying to go to sleep? No? Yes, Ray? I believe that you have actually read the entire code. It's a snoozer right now. But it needed a lot of updating. There's lots of different ways that we're utilizing data today. As I mentioned, secondary data is really, really important for us as an industry, and we're still learning how to work with it. Making sure that we're inclusive of other types of definitions of market research or marketing intelligence that involve data that we're actively working with. Certainly simplifying the code. If you've ever read the code, you know that it really needs to be simplified. and that it also aligns with the ICC Marketing and Advertising Commission. And lastly, it's really about simplifying content for global adoption so that the code is easily read not only in English, but across different global markets. And then lastly, one of the key initiatives that we've been working on is respondent education and data protection. And there has been a joint collaboration with GfK, Nielsen, ComScore, Kantar, and SMR to build a new website that's all about informing consumers about advertising research and sort of what to expect from that process, and to also give those respondents a voice if there are complaints or if there's confusion about how that process is working. And you can visit that website at researchchoices.org. It's obviously a not-for-profit website. It's simply there for educational purposes, and we'll be expanding out that website globally. So I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. I don't know how many SMR members are in the room. I know we have a few council members here. I know we have a few SMR staff here. Expanding our global reach is of really paramount importance to us. Really having a global approach, thinking globally. Expanding influence by extending reach is very, very important. Education continues to be a top priority, and I think you'll see that throughout our programming this year. And then lastly, it's really about broadening our circle. And I mean that not just about recruiting new talent into the industry, which I think is so, so important to our survival as a business, but also broadening our circle to really be inclusive of different types of data, different ways of conducting research, and really new ways of doing business, so that we continue to be relevant and that we are invited into the C-suite for those conversations. So, thank you.
So, before I run up there, are there any questions? Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks.